Hi everyone, this is going to be a tutorial on how to make a simple physical model style string pluck sound in Massive. You'll be able to follow along with most of this with any other synth, Massive X, Serum, Phase Plant, Vital, anything like that. But you might be able to take it in different directions with each of those. So for example, Massive and Massive X have internal feedback, which can create some interesting sounds, and the others don't have that, but I'm sure they have their own things you can find out for yourself. I'll first make a basic skeleton sound and then show how to build on it to make it more interesting. So here's my starting patch. It's just the default patch that Massive starts with. I'm going to turn off all of the oscillators because we're not going to be using them. We're going to be using the filters to generate most of the sound. The only thing I will do is use the noise oscillator to make a click, which we'll be using as our exciter to excite the filters. So firstly, before I forget, I'll remember to send all of the noise to the first filter by dragging that up. And then I'll bring it in and get white noise by increasing the color, and I'll use envelope 2 to control this. I'll make it snappy like a click. That sounds fine for now. We can always tune that later. So now onto the filters. We'll be using both filter slots, but before we add anything, let's make sure we change it to serial. So drag this up here. We want the signal to come in the first filter to the second one and then out. So we also need to change this mix to the bottom so that we're listening to the second filter. So now we're going to add a comb filter into the first slot. So a comb filter is just a short delay with some feedback. With enough feedback, these ring, and the longer the delay time, the lower pitch it will ring at. A nice thing is the Massive comb filter has a low pass filter in that feedback loop. So that means that every time the signal goes round that feedback, it loses some energy because of the filtering. And so that means the signal will eventually die off eventually. And we can control that with this damping here. But the first thing to do is double click on pitch to reset it to the middle of Massive's key tracking range. This will just mean that the filter will follow the frequency that we play on the keyboard. So now I'm going to turn this up just so we let some signal through the feedback, and I'll keep playing notes and increase the feedback until we get a sound that we think's appropriate. So there's our comb filtered noise pulse. So the feedback extends our original click because it gets looped around lots of times, and it dies off because of this damping filter in the feedback. So if we change this damping and hear how it sounds. So something obvious we can do now is use the velocity modulator to change how much damping there is. It's sort of down to taste and the type of sound you want to make. You could have low velocities have low damping, or low velocities have high damping. I'm going to go, just for simplicity, low velocity is low damping. So as we play harder notes, it just moves this knob up and down. So I'll play some notes now, going from low to high velocity, and you'll hear how that changes it. So now we've got that set up, we've got velocity linked to our sound. We can add a little thump to the beginning, like a string, where we get a burst of energy at the start, like a drum sound, sort of. So to do that, I'm going to use envelope 3 and put it on the pitch of the comb filter. And I'll make it snappy first by decreasing the decay and attack. And then I'll drag it up. Now we've got the thump, we can do something I don't actually use that often in synths, but we can do a sidechain modulation. What we want to do is make it so that the velocity of our note changes how much this envelope affects the pitch. So at lower velocities we might get less thump, and at higher velocities we might get more. So to do that, we'll drag velocity onto this slot here and click the SC. Now our velocity affects this modulation here. So we can click here to so that's the other way. Higher velocity reduces the amount of snap. And then this way, higher velocity, more snap. I prefer it the other way actually. Lower velocity gives more snap. So now something I'd like to do is increase the length of all the notes. It's quite short. And so I'll go into envelope 4, which is by default attached to the amplifier, and just increase the release. Now, something else I like to do with sounds like this is add a bit of randomness to some of the parameters every time a note's played. And in Massive, we do this with this modulator. This is the trigger random modulator. So every time a note's pressed, it generates a new random value. And I'm going to drag this onto damping. So now, every time we play a note, we get a slight random amount of damping added. Be careful, if you add too much, then you won't be able to hear your velocity modulation. So just a small amount, just to make sure it's not exactly the same. Might want to also do this for the level of the noise. Something else we can do to make it more interesting is add an all-pass filter. An all-pass filter doesn't filter the sound like you'd expect. All it does is change the phase of the sound around the cutoff. So by themselves you can't really hear them, but when they are then mixed with other sounds, you will hear the effect of the phase changing. This one here also has some feedback in again, so we can use this to make a sort of fake body resonance of an instrument. I'll again click here, double click to make it key track properly, and then I'll increase the resonance and hear how it sounds. Now I've set this to tune it to the same note we're playing. Something interesting to do is tune it higher, and then you'll get strange overtones. And of course, you can use the same velocity modulation here. So we could have higher velocity makes higher ringing. Another thing you can do in Massive, which we'll use to try and make it more interesting, is feedback. Before I start this section, be careful with this because it will make loud howling sounds. So add it slowly and turn your volume down, especially if you're using headphones, before you start adding it. So if I look at the routing page, we'll see the Massive will take the signal from after our amplifier, give us the option of choosing 2 effects to put in, and then it will let us mix where we send it between the 2 filters. So we want it to go to the first filter. So I'm going to add insert 1 into the feedback path, and I'm going to choose the high pass, low pass filters, because when you use feedback, a lot of the time you'll get very low sub bass build up in energy, and it sort of destroys the signal. So we can use these to filter that out. I always actually get confused which way the knobs work. I'm presuming that cuts off some of the low bass, but we'll see. Now I'm going to play some notes and I'm going to add in the feedback. Like I say, be really careful here. Just add in small amounts. So something we can do as well is add another insert, and I'm going to add the insert in between the 2 filters. So I'm going to add a shaper. If I choose insert 2 and then I pick the sine shaper, we'll turn the dry wet up and increase the drive slightly and see how that affects the sound. So as before, we can map our velocity to here. Be careful, turn it down first and then send it. We can also use the low pass, high pass filter. I don't recommend changing the high pass filter. It's there more of a utility to get rid of the DC low bass. For the low pass filter, definitely. You can try out other effects in here. The delay can make some quite strange sounds. I'm going to go back to the shaper. Something worth noting as well, in Massive you can choose where the feedback comes from, so we can click around here to change the source. Let's add some reverb, see how that sounds, just with a few. The last thing I'll go into is using the filter FM. So this uses a separate oscillator here to change the frequency of the filter. So we can do this to our all pass filter, which is making the sort of weird resonance on our sound. And if we set this to an octave up, an octave from the note we play, and then increase the FM, something more interesting is to set it to strange ratios. Of course, all of this can be modulated by the velocity again, or the random. There we go. But yeah, that's a few ideas. Play around with them, see what you come up with. Thank you.